This episode features Jimmy Carr in a wide-ranging conversation covering societal transformation, politics, culture, comedy, mental health, technology, and economics. They delve into the possibility of a significant revolution underway, the evolving nature of elites, the role of comedy in expanding social discourse, challenges in contemporary institutions, the rise of AI, and the urgent need for new ideas to address modern problems. Jimmy Carr discusses the concept of revolution as primarily the replacement of elites rather than just chaotic upheaval. He points to current turmoil within established institutions, such as the BBC, as evidence of this elite disruption. Traditional political parties, such as Labour and the Conservatives in the UK, which have long dominated governance, are losing their grip, and newer voices like podcasters and independent media figures are rising. The conversation highlights how both academia and science face crises, with social sciences experiencing replication issues and physics largely stalled. This disintegration of old elites, while unsettling, is also seen as a precursor to renewal and rebirth, reflecting historical cycles of destruction and creation. Jimmy emphasizes the role of comedy in broadening public conversations, likening it to an expansion of the Overton window, the range of acceptable discourse in society. Comedy can introduce difficult or taboo subjects in a palatable way by infusing humor, allowing audiences to engage with tough realities through a lighter lens. He cites Peter McGraw's benign violation theory to explain how making jokes about violations or societal taboos renders them less threatening, helping individuals process trauma and controversial issues. Examples like Chris Rock's nuanced commentary on wealth within the Black community illustrate comedy's power to simplify complex social critiques and provoke reflection. Comedy also encourages dialogue that transcends polarization, enabling deliberation rather than combative debate. The podcast touches on how cultural production, including comedy and films for adults, faces stagnation. Jimmy points out the decline of quality comedy movies and the death of traditional platforms like American late-night television, with fewer comedians interested in institutional roles, preferring instead to tour live. Despite comedy's rising popularity, the systems and venues that previously supported it feel smaller and more fractured. He connects this cultural inertia to broader societal issues of outdated institutions and the need for innovation and adaptation. Referencing Neil Howe's theory of the fourth turning, Jimmy frames current societal upheavals as part of a cyclical pattern in history where crises lead to systemic change. He compares events such as the 1929 Great Depression and the 2008 financial crash as historical echoes signaling impending transformation. The discussion highlights environmental, political, and economic challenges alongside shifts in collective belief systems, especially the erosion of post-World War II foundational myths that once united societies. This loss of shared narrative weakens social cohesion and demands rethinking societal arrangements. A significant part of the dialogue focuses on mental health crises emerging from social isolation and fragmented identities. Jimmy argues that individuals do not exist purely as isolated entities, but as part of dispersed networks involving family, friends, and colleagues. The over-reliance on screens and digital technology, initially hailed as bringing people together, has instead exacerbated loneliness. Recovery from this requires reinvesting in real-world communities where people connect physically and emotionally. Drawing on Scott Galloway's assertion that social isolation harms health more than substance abuse, the conversation underscores the necessity of meaningful social interaction for well-being. Jimmy proposes radical tax reforms aimed at empowering young people, suggesting no income tax for individuals under 30 to encourage employment and economic participation. He envisions making university education a luxury that remains free only for elite or STEM students who contribute directly to societal needs. The aim is to realign incentives, reduce barriers to home ownership and family formation, and address decreasing birth rates by improving economic conditions for young adults. There is a critique of universal university attendance, arguing it dilutes educational quality and social equity. The guests highlight how traditional elites exhibit inflexible thinking and an unwillingness to entertain new ideas, particularly as technological and social transformations accelerate. Emerging challenges, such as artificial intelligence, require adaptability and open-mindedness. The conversation stresses that holding on to outdated worldviews will hinder progress. Flexibility, experimentation, and the blending of conservative respect for tradition with progressive innovation are necessary to navigate the future successfully. One suggested reform is establishing a UK sovereign wealth fund, leveraging natural resources like oil, gas, and wind energy, or even unconventional assets such as mining Bitcoin during off-peak power usage. Such a fund could generate communal wealth and reduce the dependency on conventional taxation. The discussion also calls for investment in long-term infrastructure projects to secure energy independence and economic resilience. This reformist vision contrasts with the current budget-focused political approach and calls for far-sightedness and statesmanship rather than short-term politicking. The podcast explores a shift in political landscapes marked by a gentrification of traditional parties like Labor, which once represented working-class interests but now appeal differently. The erosion of liberal democracy's foundational myths raises questions about its sustainability amid rising extremism. The guests touch on geopolitical changes toward a multipolar world order with ongoing proxy conflicts but no direct world war, partly due to nuclear deterrence. These shifts require reevaluating political ideologies and governance structures as the viability of old liberal models comes under pressure. The importance of play in comedy, sports, theater, and other social activities is emphasized as foundational to communication, cooperation, and human flourishing. Live shared experiences create bonds and collective joy that digital interactions fail to replicate fully. The pandemic-induced social disruptions and increased reliance on digital technologies have diminished opportunities for play and communal happiness, contributing to social fragmentation and mental health challenges. There is criticism of current educational priorities that overemphasize university attendance and underinvest in vocational training and STEM fields. The UK's strained medical workforce is used as an example where importing professionals from overseas undermines domestic opportunity and capacity building. The speakers argue for raising academic standards, removing caps on medical school admissions, and reorienting resources to practical education that meets societal needs while respecting individual aptitudes and preferences. AI is framed as a disruptive force that could radically transform jobs, politics, and science. While job displacement is a real concern, Jimmy suggests other primary risks include enabling authoritarian surveillance states at a fraction of previous costs, threatening civil liberties. He also highlights AI's potential to rejuvenate stalled fields like physics, possibly ushering in technological leaps that could create abundance and prosperity. The need to balance safety and freedom amid AI's rise is underscored. The discussion addresses immigration from the standpoint that while immigrants contribute essential labor, much of the current reliance results from domestic policy failures, particularly in healthcare professional training. The idea of exporting institutions as a form of cultural and economic diplomacy is raised, drawing parallels to North and South Korea and East and West Germany. The need to respect developmental disparities and avoid harming source countries by excessive brain drain is stressed. Questions of sustainability and equity in global prosperity are intertwined with debates on climate, energy, and economic policy. The negative effects of social media on listening skills, resilience, and group cohesion are discussed at length. The breakdown of community and increasing isolation are exacerbated by digital culture, where online shaming and cancel culture remove social safety nets essential for rehabilitation and forgiveness. The guests contrast these secular deficiencies with religious frameworks that historically manage shame and forgiveness more effectively, suggesting society must find mechanisms to reintegrate people after mistakes and reduce social isolation. Parenthood is explored as a key source of personal meaning and societal continuity, but is challenged by economic and social pressures. Removing taxes on young adults could support family formation by making housing and child-rearing more affordable. The discussion also touches on the mutual support families provide and their role in mental health and community building. The experience of welcoming in-laws and expanded family support after having children highlights social interdependence often underestimated in modern individualism. Drawing inspiration from British cycling's incremental improvements, Jimmy advocates for small, continuous changes rather than sweeping reforms to drive societal progress. Using empirical experimentation and split testing to find effective policies and practices is championed over ideological rigidity. This approach encourages combining conservative respect for traditions that have worked with openness to innovation and adaptation as circumstances change. Comedy shows and live entertainment are portrayed as vital venues for communal experience, laughter, and social bonding. Jimmy remarks on how live performance rekindles human connection lost in digital consumption. Sharing moments of joy and even vulnerability within the comedic performance creates a collective atmosphere that fosters empathy and relieves tensions, counteracting the fragmentation pervasive in modern society. Apart from broad social themes, Jimmy identifies burning biomass in developing countries and smoking as underestimated public health crises causing millions of premature deaths annually. These problems are labeled low-hanging fruit that can be addressed relatively easily with proper policies and global cooperation, contrasting with more intractable issues. Jimmy advocates for a triage approach to global problems, focusing limited resources and attention on easy-to-fix but massive issues such as indoor air pollution from burning biomass and tobacco smoking. He stresses that Western societies tend to be too self-absorbed, highlighting the necessity of addressing practical problems with clear, impactful interventions that improve lives worldwide.